Hello, I'm Carmi Levy. This is number 0871, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0871. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Erik D'Souza, who is the author of Death on the Rocks, a thriller that features a senior citizen sleuth. Every mystery writer has a what-if question. So, what's Erik's?
Every fictional story begins with a what-if question. So my what-if question was, what if a murder occurred in my mom's community and both these rivals wanted to blame each other for that murder without even having any facts? They were just instantly, that's the person that did it. So in reality, there was no murder in my mom's community, but the what-if question was, what if she was being framed for murder and how would she deal with it? Knowing my mom, she has the same tools. Like my mom's basic tools is good observation skills, and she's read a lot.
Matthew Corey is the creator of the Star Trek fan fiction script that he's produced in audio form called Flying Saucer, an homage to the animated series Lower Decks. How did this script come about?
I had submitted a script to Star Trek The Next Generation. They were a very rare show even back then where they would take scripts from writers that didn't have agents. Somehow my script beat the odds, it sold, and it became an episode. Fast forward about 30 years, Star Trek Lower Decks comes on TV. I really grew to love the show. I'd had this idea for an episode that I was playing around with. I got to the point where it instead of just an idea, it started to become more formed. I realized I could probably get a whole episode script out of this thing.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back on the show to talk about the successful Artemis II mission around the moon. The most dangerous part of the mission was near the end, re-entering Earth's atmosphere.
There's temperatures of over 4,000 degrees Celsius that the underbelly of the spacecraft experiences for a few moments. There's not much of a margin of error. It's less than 1% in how they attack the angle of the re-entry. If they hit the atmosphere at too shallow of an angle, the spacecraft just bounces off the atmosphere back out into space forever. It's like skipping a stone on a pond. If they hit it too steeply, they literally burn up. That was like basically a do or die situation.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, Sir Dudley's Poetry Corner, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest later, the person who told you this was show number 0871, was technology analyst and journalist Carmi Levy. He's everywhere on television, from CTV News to CBC, and everywhere in between. Thank you very much, Carmi, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. A Florida homeowner's security camera recorded the moment an electric wheelchair exploded in her driveway after she moved it outside due to safety concerns. Alexandra Anea had purchased the Zinger Power wheelchair from a thrift store for her family member and was charging its lithium battery with a non-manufacturer charger when she heard clicking sounds. The battery's hot temperature prompted her to search online for guidance. What she found was a line that said, "Imminent danger, put it on cement or somewhere where other things won't catch fire." Video shows Anea placing the chair on her driveway and rushing away seconds before the explosion. Chair fragments struck her back as she fled. She said, "I heard it hiss first before it exploded, and that's why I turned to run. Hollywood Fire Rescue shared the footage and safety tips warning against using incompatible chargers.
Compare Zinger to the rest. The Zinger is made from rugged aluminum, has a compact and powerful battery, is the world's lightest and most portable personal mobility device. Quick, nimble, and fun to drive.
It actually sounds like a very good product, but, just read the instructions. Yeah. Seaman High School junior Brecken Andrews and his friends made an unconventional prom entrance when they rode in the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile on April 19th. The idea sparked after the students spotted the hot dog-shaped vehicle at a Dillon's grocery store in Topeka, Kansas, during a Sonic restaurant visit. Andrews approached driver Maggie Dawson, known as a hot dogger, asking if they could use the vehicle for prom transportation. Dawson quickly agreed after checking her schedule. The Oscar Mayer crew provided free transportation to the dance. Said student Cooper Leitz, "People take limos. This is basically just a big hot dog limo." Wow. Being driven in a Wienermobile to a prom at Seaman High School, that last sentence alone would make Sigmund Freud's head explode. Organizers at the Cumbria Nature Festival in England issued an important clarification after confusion about the event's purpose. The festival targets naturalists, not naturists. Organizers explained on social media following an inquiry from a prospective visitor. The post stated, "Cumbria Nature Festival is primarily aimed at naturalists, not naturists, whilst we aim to be as inclusive as possible and certainly do not judge anyone, we are aiming the event at wildlife enthusiasts. Please do dress appropriately." Committee member Sam Griffin said that nudists who mistakenly booked tickets can receive full refunds. "We haven't ultimately had to refund anyone, so we're hopeful our offering has been sufficient to retain their interest despite imposing a dress code." He noted people often confuse naturalists with something else. The festival runs from May 8th to the 10th. Okay, while some people might confuse naturalists with either naturists or nudists, it doesn't help that they say the event attracts wildlife enthusiasts. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, Malaysia-based Carix, the world's biggest condom manufacturer, producing over 5 billion annually, will raise prices 20 to 30% due to Middle East conflict disruptions. The company makes condoms for brands including Durex and Trojan, plus health systems and UN aid programs. The company's CEO, Go Mia Kat, told Reuters the Iran war increased costs for synthetic rubber, nitrile, foil packaging, and silicone oil materials. He said, "We have no choice but to transfer the cost right now to the customers. The increases will take effect within months, calling them one of the biggest we've done in a very long time." Go noted higher costs don't reduce consumer purchases, explaining people need condoms more during uncertain times. He said, "If you have a baby right now, you'll have one more mouth to feed." Well, I guess they could always go back to a time before petroleum products, when they made condoms out of sheep or goat intestines. Although, I assume that the goats won't be happy to hear that. And let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Erik D'Souza is not only an author, he's also the marketing manager of Crime Writers of Canada and is the president of the Tri-City Wordsmiths. He's also the author of Death on the Rocks, which is the second installment of an acclaimed mystery series. Erik joins us from Vancouver, BC via riverside.com. Hi, Erik.
Hi, Peter. How are you today?
Just tickety-boo. Thank you very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. As I mentioned, the Death on the Rocks book of yours is the second installment of an acclaimed mystery series. When you first started writing the series, did you plan it to be a series, or were you initially writing a one-off?
Yeah, that's a question that all authors, when they start a new project, have to decide. And depending on what your agent says or what your marketing manager says, a series is very different, or planning to write a series is very different than writing a standalone. I chose from the beginning to write at least a 3-part series. I'm in the process of working on the third book right now. In theory, I might end it here or I might continue it. But in general, in my head, from the beginning, 10 years ago, I always envisioned a 3-book series.
One of the things that's difficult to gauge is you never really know if something that you're writing or working on is attracting the audience. So were you really concerned, considering the fact that you were doing a multiple book series, that you were thinking, well, what if this first one doesn't do what I want it to do?
Well, that's very true, and especially if you're a self-published author. A lot of people think that you write a book and that's the end of it. And for a lot of people, that's fine. I did want to make a living out of doing this. I'm in the process of making a living doing this. And I knew that I had to reach a specific audience. I write Senior Sleuth. My main character, Suzanne Rickson, is 68 years old at the beginning of the series. That was more or less the demographic that I was trying to reach. I thought about it a lot. I thought that, who else reads more than my mom or my grandmother? Senior women, retired women, have a lot more free time and read ferociously. So I wanted to write a book to them. And typically, cozies or traditional mysteries, right now, the protagonist is usually about 30 years old. Maybe she has a bakery or her own business. She probably doesn't have children. She might have a plucky mother or grandmother. And that's a very stereotypical traditional mystery that's being written right now. I wanted to write a mystery that was speaking directly to people of my mother's age. My main character, Suzanne Rickson, is based on my mother. She lives in the same place that my mother lives, on the Sunshine Coast of BC. And I knew that I had to market differently. I'm not on TikTok or Instagram trying to reach women of 75 years old. They do use Facebook, so I'm on Facebook a lot, and I try to speak to them. I also, on Amazon, make large font books, and those do quite well. So I know I'm reaching the audience I want to.
So tell us about the book. Tell us what Death on the Rocks is all about.
So Death on the Rocks, being the second of the series, is dealing with Suzanne Rickson. In the first book, it's very heavily based on her. She's being framed for a murder that obviously she didn't commit, and she had to prove her innocence by revealing the true villain. In the second book, it's centered a little bit more around her husband, Charles. One of the reasons being is I got a lot of feedback from people, and they were saying, we love Charles, how come he's not in it more? So I was like, okay, well, I could write about him a little bit more, and what if he was the one who was being framed by murder, or for murder? I started from that, and in real life, my dad belongs to a community group that puts on theater shows at the senior center. I've been to them. They're a lot of fun. At this point, my dad's even producing them. And I started to think in my head, what if Charles was singing at that event and something happened to the beloved producer-director? Is there going to be a power struggle? Will other people try to have that position? I also started to deal with family a little bit more and dealing with his family. And, was it murder for the sake of inheritance? There was a lot of what ifs, but it's very much dealing with the theater troupe and the chaos that a theater troupe can have. And it was a lot of fun. And yeah, there is a lot more Charles in there.
You say that your protagonist is based on your mother. How does your mother feel about that?
She had to get used to it at first, but I did warn her. as I said, I wanted to write a story for specifically her. A lot of times when I think about my demographic of who I'm writing to, I think of writing to a specific person, knowing that that person represents a larger demographic. So right from the beginning, I was like, Mom, my main character is based on you. And it actually, in the first book, the plot is based on her. It started from my mom, who lives in a seniors community, and she was having a long-term rivalry with the, out east you'd call it the HOA president. In the west would be the strata president. And that sort of became like my launching pad. Every fictional story begins with a what if question. So my what if question was, what if a murder occurred in my mom's community and both these rivals wanted to blame each other for that murder without even having any facts? They were just instantly, that's the person that did it. So in reality, there was no murder in my mom's community. But the what if question is, what if she was being framed for murder, and how would she deal with it? And knowing my mom, she has the same tools. Like, it's my mom's basic tools is good observation skills, and she's read a lot. Maybe it's cliche to say that reading a lot is a superpower, but I think nowadays it is a sign of experience and knowledge. You know, having read every Agatha Christie book kind of puts you in a good position to live in that world. There are certain differences. My mom hates jazz. Suzanne Rickson loves jazz. My mom hates tea. Suzanne Rickson drinks tea all the time. But at the same time, my mom loves mahjong, and a lot of the first book centers around a mahjong table and the people at that table discussing life and current events.
So you write a mystery novel that has a protagonist that is female. You are not female. Now, you are also, as I mentioned in the introduction, the marketing manager of the Crime Writers of Canada and also the president of the Tri-City Wordsmiths. Now, several years ago, I had the opportunity to talk to the ladies of the Killing Circle. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Mary Jane Maffini, Linda Wicken, Vicky Cameron, and Sue Pike. They were at an organization called Bloody Words 5, which was based in Ottawa. There was a gathering at the Lord Elgin Hotel. Anyway, I asked them, what's the difference between male mystery writers and female mystery writers? And all of them said female mystery writers feed their characters. Do you agree with that?
I don't know, because as a male writing a female character, it does have its challenges. The biggest way to overcome that challenges is to get female beta readers to tell you if you're doing a decent job, and you may have to make tweaks. I mean, female characters, fictional characters, still have to deal with problems that males may not understand. They do believe in community in general more than the average male. At the same time, though, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I work with a lot of writers. I know some of those writers that you mentioned. I perhaps have a finger or a knowledge of community and wanting to support the family more than maybe the average male who goes to work. I raised both my boys. I understand the sacrifices that a lot of housewives in the past and currently still do, and how thankless of a job it is to raise children and to make sacrifices to your career. I knew that approaching a female character was going to be different than writing a male character. At the same time, typically in a cozy traditional mystery, it's not a male character. 75 to maybe 80% of my readers are going to be female over male. And I knew I wanted to speak to them, so I needed to use a female voice.
Also, when I say feed their characters, there's a lot of food.
Oh, you meant literally feed.
They literally feed their characters more so than male writers do.
I find, and maybe my readers are going to disagree with me. I don't like, when I read these stories, I don't like, full menus. And a lot of cozies will have recipes and everything like that. I do have food in it, but again, in my sort of gender role reversal, my dad cooks more than my mom. And a lot of the food that is being served is often prepared by my father. So it was the same in reality in my story. My dad's often cooking, and Suzanne, whose point of view it is not thinking about food as much. Now, she is a huge tea and coffee drinker, and I would say maybe half the story takes place with her drinking tea or at a cafe. So there's a cafe tea feel to it more than maybe a dinner or lunch feel to it. There's a lot of, oh, somebody came over, let me make you some tea. Let's sit down and let's talk.
You have written the second book. You're about to do the third book, so obviously it's successful. Would you like to see the characters in your novels on the page, lift them from the page and perhaps put them on the screen, either the small or big screen?
Yes, I can't lie to you that, yeah, I've always envisioned it. Like, I'd love for like CBC to one day pick up the story, or Shaftesbury, the people that make Murdoch Mystery, to pick it up. That's a dream. I don't know if I'm writing for the dream. I think maybe I'm writing for my own goals. You know, success is different for everybody. Being an employee of Crime Writers Canada, I didn't realize this at first, but I get to speak to so many great Canadian mystery writers. We mentioned Murdoch Mystery, so I mean, I've talked many times with Maureen Jennings. I've met Louise Penny, Vicky Delaney, Kathy Ace, and all these great, amazing Canadian writers. And I almost feel like a success because maybe it's the camaraderie. Being able to say that you're one of them, to me, feels successful too. Again, maybe it's that sense of community that I have. Being a Canadian crime writer, being a member of that community is important to me, and I enjoy it.
Well, congratulations on the book. It's called Death on the Rocks. Erik, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you so much for talking to me. It was a pleasure.
Erik D'Souza, author of Death on the Rocks. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0871, and you'll find the link to Erik's site, plus links to either amazon.com or amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
What do you call a detective who accidentally solves cases? Sherlock Holmes.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
I'm standing with hand on heart. For Canada. Hi, this is Dan Hill. I grew up in the vinyl album era, so I've always loved reading liner notes. Nowadays, I carry that passion with me every time I go shopping. I read every label. And when the label says Canada, that's music to my ears. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Coming to you from the outskirts of sanity, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come in the program, we will talk to Matthew Corey, the creator of Flying Saucer, plus Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back with his monthly visit talking about Artemis II's mission. And we also have Sir Dudley's Poetry Corner, a morning shower thought, and of course, the idiot of the day. But we've got much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. 42-year-old Lisa Nagel faces misdemeanor charges after giving police a false name during a disturbance call in Jensen Beach, Florida on April 19th. When deputies responded to her home, Nagel slammed the door in an officer's face and was placed in handcuffs. During questioning, she told police her name was Donald Duck, instead of providing her real identity. Actually, what she probably said was, Yeah. Nagel, a tattoo artist, also managed to slip out of one of the handcuffs while detained. Nagel was arrested for resisting without violence and providing a false name to law enforcement, both misdemeanor offenses. She was booked into county jail and later released on a $1,000 bond. Her arraignment is scheduled for May the 14th. Well, on that date, her duck might be cooked. Yeah. A life jacket worn by Titanic survivor Laura Mabel Francatelli sold for $904,500 at Henry Aldrich & Son.
Henry Aldrich! Coming, Mother!
No, I'm not talking about that Henry Aldrich. I'm talking about the auction house in Wiltshire in the UK. Anyway, that price nearly doubled its estimated value of $339,000 to $474,000. The first-class passenger's cork-filled jacket features 12 pouches and bears signatures from Francatelli and other survivors. Previously displayed at Titanic Belfast Museum near the ship's construction site, it represents the only survivor's life jacket ever auctioned. Managing Director Andrew Aldrich called it a once-in-a-generation opportunity for collectors and one of the most iconic items from the Titanic ever offered for auction. Only 700 of the 2,200 people aboard survived after the ship struck an iceberg off Canada's coast 114 years ago. Aldrich noted that each passenger had a story, creating over 2,200 chapters of history preserved through memorabilia. You know, in the movie, Jack could have used a life jacket himself instead of trying to hitch a ride on the door prize Rose was floating on. I'm also often amused by the gallows humor of Belfast shipyard Harland and Wolff, the makers of the Titanic. The maritime shop there has T-shirts emblazoned with the phrase, "She was all right when she left here." And finally, before we get to our next guest here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a patron who was visibly upset about the hardness of the bread used for his sandwich struck a Subway employee in the face, according to police, who arrested the man for battery in the latest episode of fast food rage plaguing the U.S. Investigators say that 43-year-old Roy McIntosh arrived on the morning of April 21st at a Subway in Wildwood, Florida, and confronted a male employee with his bread beef.
At Subway restaurants, you choose your freshly baked bread.
During a brief verbal interaction, McIntosh suddenly struck the worker across the left side of his face with an open hand. A witness who was seated in the restaurant booth told cops that the 6'2", 240-pound suspect became verbally upset and slapped the victim across the face before exiting the business. Police tracked down McIntosh. He reportedly confessed to striking the sandwich artisan, claiming that the victim intentionally gave him old stale bread on a sandwich he purchased a week earlier. McIntosh claimed that when he confronted the worker, he just began to laugh, which caused him to strike the victim. So I guess McIntosh thought the bread was stale, but the employee was fresh. Yeah. McIntosh was booked into the county jail for battery. He was released from custody after posting a $1,000 bond on a misdemeanor charge. I don't understand it. If McIntosh was hot and bothered about his sandwich, then why did he wait a week to go back to Subway? His anger is kind of stale.
Subway, eat fresh.
And now, this.
The Stuff File presents Sir Dudley Piddly Havisham Sedgwick Smythe's Poetry Corner.
A newspaper man named Fling could make copy from any old thing, but the copy he wrote of a $5 note was so good he is now in Sing Sing.
And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Matthew Corey is a video-audio editor who has created a Star Trek fan production called Flying Saucer, a fan tribute to Lower Decks, and it was released in mid-April. Full disclosure, I'm one of the voice actors on it, And Matthew joins us from Cary, North Carolina via riverside.com. Hi, Matthew.
Hey, Peter. Great to be on the show.
Great to have you on the program. So, how did this begin for you? How did this fan production start?
Well, many years ago, back in a time we called the 90s, I had submitted a script to Star Trek The Next Generation. They were a very rare show even back then where they would take scripts from writers that didn't have agents. You just had to have it fully formatted and submit it using their release forms. And somehow my script beat the odds, it sold, and it became an episode. And we'll touch more on that later. But fast forward about 30 years, and Star Trek Lower Decks comes on TV. And it took me a couple of episodes to get into it, but I really, really grew to love the show. And I'd had this idea for an episode that I was playing around with. And I finally got to the point where it instead of just an idea, it started to become more formed in it. And I realized I could probably, get a whole episode script out of this thing. And so, I started writing, put it together. And then, I haven't really done any professional writing in a long time, so you have to have an agent for everything these days. And I actually did find an agent that was willing to represent the script, and it was hopefully going to be submitted to see if series creator Mike McMahon liked it enough to put it in the 6th season of Lower Decks. But sadly, the series ended at the 5th season, so it never got a chance. I never really got a chance to submit it. But I really liked this story, and I said, well, maybe I could rewrite it in an audio format and try and do, I call it a dramatic reading, or a reading of the fan fiction. That's so, because they have kind of rules against fan films now, or that you have to follow, which we did. I made every effort to follow their fan guidelines, because, I don't want to cause any trouble or make any ripples. Just, you get to this point where, as a writer, a lot of times 90% of everything you write never gets past a couple of people in your close orbit. And I liked this one, and I wanted to be able to share it with people, because, a lot of people do miss Lower Decks, and I hope this would be, something that either they would experience and enjoy, or hopefully draw new people in to go back and watch Lower Decks.
You mentioned the situation with copyright, and what kind of access did you have to the people at Paramount to allow you to do this? Were they aware of what you were doing with Flying Saucer?
No, they put out general guidelines for fan film productions. Probably, it's been about 10 years, because for a while they would let people make their own fan films as long as they weren't profiting on it. And the early days, it was people would make little shorts. They would recreate sets mostly from the original 60s TV series. There a couple of the big ones actually put out full-length episodes that look just like they were done by NBC in the 60s, except for, you have different people playing the main characters. And for a long time, CBS and Paramount were okay letting that go. Again, as long as you weren't charging people to see it, you weren't selling DVDs or anything. And they kind of started to take notice once the Kickstarter era began, once you could go online and finance and make a lot of money off of it. And then also another thing that was happening at the time, they were getting ready to get back into series production when Discovery was being planned. And I think it was a twofold process of these fan productions are getting a little big now, and we don't want to be competing against our own IP when we come out with Discovery.
So how different was the episode that you wrote initially for Lower Decks and what has become Flying Saucer?
It's very similar story-wise. I had to change a couple of little things. I added a narrator character for a few parts, just because there's no visual. So you have to find a way to tell people where the ship is, or what the crew is doing. And I try to keep the narration very minimal, just so it sets the scene, and then the dialogue carries the rest of it.
And how did you go about roping in the actors?
I was lucky. I found some podcaster friends that were interested and willing to help out. They're the guys from a wonderful podcast called The Spoon that you were a frequent guest on. And of course, you were very kind enough to lend me your voice to voice a Star Trek legend, to say the least. And I got to tell you, that was when you did that, and I heard the recording of you doing it's a small part, but it's a wonderful part. That's really what gave me just the jolt to get this done. Because, I had a couple of people record a few lines here and there, and I had other few people that I thought were going to be able to help out, but it turned out they weren't able to. And I mean, even just recording an audio show, there's a lot of work which you know very well. A lot of work goes into it. And at the same time, I'm a dad to 2 kids. I have a full-time job, all this stuff. But, hearing you, it gave me that jolt to get the whole project done.
Oh, you have a real actor in that. You have Robbie Rist.
I do. He's part of the Spoon podcast guys that were nice enough to. He does the voice of the character Shax, who is sort of this larger-than-life, boisterous Bajoran chief of security on the Lower Decks show.
Let's go back a little bit, because you talked about your early writing, and you had written some stuff. I guess you were always a Star Trek fan.
Yeah, growing up, I was in middle school and high school when The Next Generation was on the air. And, it's a rough growing up, coming of age time for a lot of people. And, there's that part of you that would watch Star Trek and just, you wanted to live on that ship. And so I was also a big fan of Will Wheaton, and he was on the first 4 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation, and then he left about midway through season 4. And I always wanted to find a way to bring him back for at least an episode. And so I came up with this idea: what if Wesley Crusher was going to come visit the Enterprise for Christmas break from Starfleet Academy? And what if he brought a couple of friends from the Academy with him? And one of them would have been about my age at the time. So I was hoping, the original dream was I was going to get to play this character, but they wound up changing about 99% of what I had written on that original submission of mine. And the part was changed to Amanda Rogers, which is played by the wonderful Olivia Dabo in the episode True Q on Next Generation.
You mentioned that you were in middle school for Next Generation. Oh, God, you're so young.
I was. Not so much anymore.
I remember watching the original episodes of Star Trek when it first aired on NBC. So,
oh, wow.
I'm that old.
I grew up when I was little, I had the movies were coming out, and the original series was still making its rounds in syndication.
What was your favorite Star Trek show out of the entire canon? And is there anyone that you don't like?
My favorite show, I'd have to say Next Generation, just because that was, it's the show that literally my name is in. And one really neat thing, I did get to visit the sets back in 1993 when they were still filming season 6. So my older brother and I, he lived in Los Angeles area at the time, and so I got to go out on my spring break. I went and stayed with him, and I had a pitch session with Renee Echeverria, one of the staff writers. But he was kind enough to take us over to the sets where they shot the Enterprise scenes. And so I did get to sit, much like Wesley Crusher, I got to sit in Captain Picard's chair.
Wow. So what is your favorite captain of all time?
That's a tough one, because there's so many great captains. Obviously, I'm favored towards Captain Picard, but none of the others would be there without Captain Kirk. He set the standard, and then of course you've got Janeway. She was fantastic, and Captain Sisko, who eventually he got promoted to captain during the show's run.
Actually, Janeway is my favorite.
Oh, a good choice.
So how can one find Flying Saucer?
It's available on YouTube for free to enjoy. I think if you just do a search for Flying Saucer, Lower Decks, it should come up. And it doesn't look impressive because there's just a title screen, because there's no visual element. But the audio is great. I put a few little sound effects in there. But it's mainly just, it's another way to share a story of a great show that you never know. Maybe one day, depending on how things go with Star Trek, they can bring it back, like has happened with Futurama, Family Guy. I think American Dad went through the same process. But animated shows, you can come back even years later, and as long as the people, most of the voice actors are still alive, you can do a great show. As long as they do bring it back, they have to have Mike McMahon involved.
Now that you've done Flying Saucer, would you think of doing another fan tribute? Another Star Trek fan production?
Well, it took me about 30 years between coming up with the script that became True Q and the one for Flying Saucer. So maybe in another 29 years or so, I'll have another idea that I think is good enough to actually write out as a script.
Yeah, but you've now produced this one, so there's literally blood in the water.
There is. Hopefully, it could lead to me doing other sorts of creative projects, not necessarily Star Trek fan fix or fan productions directly. But you never know. I mean, it's a big world.
Well, congratulations on Flying Saucer, a fan tribute. And thank you very, very much, Matthew, for, first of all, reaching out to me, and also for being a guest on the program.
That's right. And if you guys do listen to it, you'll have to listen till the end to hear Peter, but he does show up, I promise.
Matthew Corey, the creator of the Star Trek fan production called Flying Saucer, a fan tribute to Lower Decks. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0871, and you'll find the YouTube link to Flying Saucer. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
The Swiss must have been pretty confident in their chances of victory, since they included a wine bottle corkscrew on their army knives.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife by Michael Liebling is not like any serial killer novel you've ever read before.
Go ahead. I dare you to figure it out before the chilling end.
Find out what it's like to be the offspring of a multiple murderer.
Locked in a room or locked in your mind, it's really all the same.
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife by Michael Liebling. Available everywhere you buy books.
Latitude 47 degrees 14 minutes north. Longitude 84 degrees 39 minutes west. Location Montreal, Canada. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. And Andrew, I guess this time around, we're all about the successful mission of Artemis II.
Yeah, absolutely. What a mission. I mean, this has been something in the making for a number of years, and it's just been fantastic to see that it finally got off the ground. It was a really, really successful mission all the way through. Obviously, there were some hiccups along the way, but really the point is that they managed to test this mission. You have to remember what Artemis 2 was all about. It was a shakedown, a full testing of all the technology, from the booster rocket, the SLS launch system, to the Orion capsule, how it functions, can it maintain a safe environment for the astronauts, how do astronauts actually also perform in deep space. And this whole idea of deep space, just remember, the point is that we have been going to space for multiple decades, since Apollo, basically into low Earth orbit. just a few hundred kilometers in altitude. That's where the space station sits. And really, we've been just trafficking back and forth from the space station mostly for decades. And even before that, the space shuttle as well was just basically collecting and launching satellites out of its cargo bay using the Canadarm. That's what we've been doing for decades. And so now what we're talking about is moving away back into deep space. The moon is 400,000 kilometers away. And this mission was all about how do we function? How do we get back in the game of going to the moon and starting the confidence building that NASA really needed with this mission so they know that how this technology functions. That's what it was about.
The thing that is pretty exciting about this was the fact that it brought people together.
Yeah, exactly. It did bring people together. And especially, I think when you say that, what comes to mind are, a few touch points in the mission. When they were heading towards them, they were just on the eve of going around the moon, swinging around the backside of the moon. The crew that final morning before they swung around the moon, they got a pre-recorded message from Jim Lovell, the Apollo 8, Apollo 13 astronaut. Obviously, he's now passed away. He recorded a message last summer before he passed, specifically for this crew for that moment of when they were just about to swing around the moon. And it was a very touching recording. I was watching the whole thing, Peter. I didn't get very much sleep during this mission because it was a 24/7 live stream of everything that was happening during the 10-day mission. And I was there listening to Jim Lovell's voice. And it was just amazing to hear him, saying that it's time to pass the torch to the next generation of lunar explorers and, welcome to my old neighborhood. It was really quite touching. And then as they swung around the moon, the backside of the moon, they took those iconic photographs, those views that they had of the crescent Earth in the background with the craggly surface of the moon in the foreground. It was really incredible to see that. And it harkened back to, obviously, the Apollo 8 iconic image of Earthrise that they took at Christmas time back in 1968. And just to see our entire planet in one shot there, so small in the black inkiness of space, it really is a very humbling perspective. And you don't see any borders anymore. All those conflicts and things that are happening on our planet, they just completely disappear from that viewpoint. I think that is a very special moment in that flight. I think it captured a lot of people's imagination. And I think hopefully it was an inspiration to young people everywhere.
Besides the message from Jim Lovell, the idea of the naming of a crater for one of the astronauts' wives, late wives.
That's right. Reed Wiseman, the head of the crew, his wife passed away a few years ago from cancer. And she was really part of the Artemis family. And it was quite touching to see that they named a crater that they saw out their porthole of their Integrity spacecraft looking down at the moon. They proposed that name of Carol, her name, which was really touching. And they also named the second crater for their spaceship, actually, Integrity. So that's put forth to the International Astronomical Union, who international scientific body is, who is responsible for naming features on celestial bodies. And so it'll be really neat to have these craters there forever named on moon maps.
There was a certain camaraderie amongst the four astronauts. They just seemed like a unit. And bringing back that idea of naming the crater, when her husband mentioned Carol's name, he couldn't necessarily finish. And just on a beat, one of his other astronauts finished the dedication.
Yeah, it was really, and then they had this big group hug, right? It was really impressive. There's no dry eye. I think you could tell from the images amongst the crew, and I think just everyone, even in Mission Control, they were showing video there, live video, and you could see people, wiping tears from their eyes because it was a very touching. I think it was one of those moments that brought the humanity to this historic event. That relies so much on technology. There's so much science going on. There's just a lot of factors be at play, but at the core of everything is that this is truly a human experience.
Absolutely. Now, you say that you had some sleepless nights because of the mission itself. What about some edgy moments? And I know for me, that reentry, you wondered, will the heat shields hold?
Really, that is well known that re-entry is, other than, launch day, it's the re-entry that is so critical, obviously. And it comes down to that heat shield, that protective material that's on the underbelly of the Orion spacecraft. There's been a lot of talk about that over the many years of the material. That's the same material that actually was used on the Apollo spacecrafts over 5 decades ago. And they're still being used. They're good, they function, but with the way that the spacecraft is designed, in the first test a few years ago on reentry, the uncrewed first test of the Artemis spacecraft, it really had a lot of damage, burning through reentry, because you have to remember there's temperatures of over 4,000 degrees Celsius that the underbelly of the spacecraft experiences for a few moments as it's entering the atmosphere. And there's not much of a margin of error, Peter. I mean, it's less than 1% in how they attack the angle of the reentry, how they attack the reentry. So if they hit the atmosphere, and they're going at speeds of something like 40,000 kilometers per hour, if they hit the atmosphere at too shallow of an angle, the spacecraft just bounces off the atmosphere back out into space forever. It's like skipping a stone on a pond, that effect. If they hit it too steeply, the atmosphere, they literally burn up. So that was like basically a do or die situation. Everyone you could see was on pins and needles at Mission Control in Houston. On those live cameras, you could see it was very intense, those few moments. And especially there's that radio blackout too. I don't know if you noticed that, Peter. There was like just this few moments as they're going through the fiery moments of the reentry where they're literally the outside of the spacecraft is on fire. There is no radio communication. That lasts for a few minutes.
Actually, it's 6 minutes to be total.
Isn't that incredible? They're on their own. They can actually see the flames by their windows. I can't even imagine what those moments are like. And, to hear that, the voices come back, it was just so riveting. I mean, literally, I'm just watching on my computer screen and I'm holding onto the side of my chair, and I can tell, like I'm really squeezing the sides of my chair watching those moments, because everything, of course, comes down to that moment. If we would have lost the mission, lost the crew on return, that would have really set back the entire Artemis program, I am sure. So it was a big sigh of relief for everyone. Means that, the Artemis program does continue at a fast pace.
Again, the camaraderie between the 4 astronauts, including one Canadian, it was a sight to behold. It was great. We have run out of time, but I think we should go to Patreon and continue this conversation, because now that it has been a successful mission, what's next? And also, who will be the first ones to set on the moon again?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you ready to go to Patreon?
Yeah. This is a big question. Let's tackle them.
Excellent.
You bet. Let's go. Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0871, and you'll find links to Andrew's site to get your own personal autographed copy of his books. Patreon subscribers, you can hear more of Andrew as a Patreon reward extra, where we'll continue to discuss the Artemis mission and the future of the program, plus Chinese astronauts on the moon. Interstellar Comet 3I Atlas is carrying tons of water and methanol, the problem of light pollution on Earth impeding the night sky, and more. Just go to our Patreon page, and if you're not already a member, become one of the select patrons of the show. Visit patreon.com/The Stuff File Program. You're listening to The Stuff File Program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. Anyway, boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
As herds of elk have overtaken a beach in a small Oregon coastal town, tourists have tried to put their children on them to ride, and others attempted to feed them carrots. Not the children, the elk. Yeah, anyway. Said James Pano, executive director of the local Chamber of Commerce, "We have visitors who don't know elk are wild animals. And as in Yellowstone National Park, Estes Park, Colorado, and other places where people and elk are in close proximity, some people behave stupidly." I couldn't have said it better myself. Anyway, the elk could possibly be drawn to the beach seeking saltwater therapy for biting pests, said Paul Atwood, a district wildlife biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's not uncommon to see elk going out into salt water. It's commonly thought to be therapeutic for external parasites such as fleas. Well, I think James Pano, the first person who I quoted, said it best, but I have to reiterate. Why, oh why, would you put your child, your prodigy, the fruit of your loins, to sit on a wild elk? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File Program, number 0871. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com. And once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number. And once again, that's 0871. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdxradio.com and over the air on stations like
World FM New Zealand,
WNRHLP-FM Newport Richey, Florida,
KZCHLP-FM Eureka, California,
WFNULP St. Paul, Minnesota,
CKUW-FM Winnipeg,
CFMU Hamilton,
CKLU Sudbury,
Local 107.3 FM St. John,
CHSR Fredericton.
Plus, streaming on any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been getting jiggy with Peter Anthony Holder and the Stuff File Program, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. He's a bad mamma jamma, and after he spends some chill time in his crib, he'll be back to get down with his bad self. Word up.